Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Friday, March 26th, 2021. On today's episode, we're going to have a spoiler-filled discussion about The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Episode 2, Star-Spangled Man. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And Brad, you weren't here last week.
That's true. I was absent, but I did watch the first episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah, so why don't you tell us, what did you think of the first episode?
In general, I enjoyed it. It's definitely more straightforward than WandaVision as far as the storytelling style. Fits a little bit more cleaner into the Marvel Cinematic Universe as far as just how it's shot. Pretty straightforward action, narrative kind of thing. But one thing I do appreciate, and I hope that this is a taste of what's to come for all of these shows, is that I like that it allows us to dig into Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes as characters, and I feel like the trauma that Bucky is still dealing with by being turned into an assassin by Hydra, and the struggles that Sam is having as a black man who is a superhero, and this social commentary on race and just his place in society as this black hero. There's a lot of interesting things that they're doing that I was not fully expecting. And we'll talk more about how that carries even further into the second episode as well.
Yeah, these shows are about something more than the movies. And by that, I mean, WandaVision being about depression and all, grief, and this being about the racial inequality and, all that stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about, which I think is very cool because we don't usually expect that from our, Marvel products or Marvel content. Okay, let's get into feedback. We got a couple emails, to be honest with you. A bunch of them were invalidated by stuff that happened in this episode, so I don't really have much to read. But my friend John Armstrong did I texted him last week about the first episode, and he brought up a point that I did not connect the dots, and that is that Bucky has this list of people that he's trying to make amends with, and it's kind of like a cool reflection of Steve in his list of all the stuff he was like. I mean, it's a very sad version of Steve's list, right? And it's also two men at a time, unwilling to have these lists on their phones. They have these like small spiral bound notebooks, but I don't know. I always like when they do those kind of reflections of other things in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I think that is intentional. I don't think that's just like a coincidence. But okay, brief reaction to this episode. It's finally the Falcon and Winter Soldier, right? Like the first episode had these guys on their parallel tracks, or the two separate tracks. This one, they collide, and it's all about that collision and how these guys are gonna get along with each other to defeat evil in a time where they both have some serious issues with each other. And I really like that the action in this one wasn't as good as the first one, but I do like that they're bringing in all these new characters to the mix, and it's certainly making this thing a little bit more interesting. Ben, what did you think?
Oh boy, I didn't like it as much as the first episode, to be honest with you. I think a lot of this episode just doesn't really work that well. The action stuff, the sort of dynamic between Bucky and Sam, which, to be completely frank, I've never super latched onto, and that's never been my favorite dynamic of anything that they've been doing in the Marvel movies.
I love that bickering back and forth. It's like two brothers. Like,
it's real tough to get right, in my opinion, and I feel like this, in movies like Civil War and other instances where those characters have appeared and done that bickering thing, it has been done okay. It's been better than something like Hobbs and Shaw, for example, which I think is like one of the worst examples of this kind of, macho bullshit posturing back and forth. That's a way worse version of this dynamic. But I have to say, in this episode, and there were several points, especially the therapy sequence, which we'll get to. It just felt like I don't know. I guess that part of their relationship came to the forefront more, and I personally appreciate it when they're each doing their thing and they're focused on a task at hand instead of exploring the relationship between those two title characters, which I personally just don't find that interesting. And maybe I'm in the minority there, but yeah, that's where I'm at. So because there was so much of a focus on that in this episode, and because I don't know, I wasn't as high on this one as I was on the first episode.
Brad, your brief reaction.
Yeah, I completely disagree with Ben. I'm surprised that I'm finding myself enjoying their dynamic even more than that I thought that I would, because I've been hesitant to like be fully on board with the series just because it felt like it was treading familiar territory, the buddy action cop comedy kind of formula. But because of how they're digging into these characters and understanding the dichotomy between these two, I like this approach of that. It's easy on the surface to see. It's like, oh, they like they have this little bit of like playful rivalry with each other, and that carries on throughout the thing. But it's a thing where the rivalry, I think, feels genuine because they're essentially two people. Obviously they're forced to work together because they're both, happen to be the close friends of Steve Rogers. One from decades ago and the other one from contemporary times, and so they each reflect different values of what Steve, found to be the good in people, and like people that he thought deserved, a second chance. Bucky deserved one on a more extreme level after being turned into an assassin by Hydra, and Sam deserved one after, previously being in the service, and then taking time to focus more on, veteran affairs and taking care of people who had previously been in the war. And so I like the idea of bringing these two together and them having a little more depth as opposed to just throwing two characters together who constantly bicker. But even then, the bickering itself, the dynamic between them, I find really funny. The conversations they're having, it feels really natural. They feel like characters who have, been lived in for a while. They understand each other, and so I like that a lot. And I think that the action is great too. I thought that the fight sequence on top of the two trucks was pretty impressive. I've been overall very surprised by how good and how large scale the action sequences have been for this being a Disney Plus series.
Okay, and this episode is 49 minutes, so it's a similar running time of the first episode. So it looks like we're going to be getting hour-long episodes for this entire season, which is kind of exciting for someone like me who likes the longer episodes.
I think with credits, it still ends up being around like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's like a standard hour-long, network cable TV show.
Yeah, but last week we were like wondering, was it just like a longer opening episode? But it looks like it's, I don't know, I could be wrong, but it looks like it might be the par for the course. This episode starts with a cold open, which makes me think that last episode was originally written with one. I had a theory last week, Brad, that originally that action scene was supposed to be the cold open and then go into the logo, and then it was going to go to, Falcon giving away the shield and stuff like that. But anyways, the last episode kind of left us with this weird looking new Captain America announced. And this is not what I expected. This episode opens with them humanizing John Walker, this new Captain America, is played by Wyatt Russell. And did either of you guys find this weird? Because I feel like he's clearly being set up as a antagonist here, but they want us to care for him, or do they?
Yeah, I think that they obviously want to flesh him out. They want him to be a real character. They want to give him depth. They don't want to just make him this, oh, look, it's a replacement Captain America who just flat out sucks and you should hate him. There's genuine good behind him, and that's the best thing about any character that becomes a villain is they feel like what they're doing is the right thing. They're just misguided, or they have like the wrong perspective. It's the same thing with Thanos. What he wanted to do, he thought was in the best interest for the entire universe, but it was just a heinous way to go about doing it. And I think that there will be a slower build, I guess, to showing that this guy probably isn't the best replacement of Captain America. And I think there's definitely hints of that in here, that he's a little bit more of an asshole. But I do like this the opening that gives us this idea of that that's just not who he is necessarily all the time.
Man, I really liked this opening scene, and I thought that signaled that we were going to see this side of this character for much longer, because he's in his like army fatigues and he's talking with his friend, and he really seems to be like taking seriously and sort of grappling with what it means to become the new Captain America. And then almost as soon as he like puts on that costume, it's almost like a switch is flipped in him and he becomes like this smug dick. And like, you know, you're clearly supposed to not like him in this episode because you see Bucky looking, you know, watching his TV broadcast and like, you know, shaking his head and making this face. And we saw the same thing with Sam in the previous episode. And like, obviously the way that he treats them later on, you know, he's supposed to be not a bad guy, but a negative force, you know, like this guy who's like swooped in and he claims that he's done the work, but we as the audience have seen what Sam and Bucky have done. We've watched them do the work, and we know that they're more, both of them, either of them is more deserving. But I loved the opening because I thought this was going to be, oh wow, this is going to be a little bit more complicated than just a sort of black and white thing. But really, I thought as soon as he put on that costume, it was like, oh well, there goes a little bit of the nuance that they had set up in that opening. But I would love it if that sort of nuance came back, if that's even possible. I'm not sure how consistent of a characterization that would be. You know, if we suddenly saw, you know, peeks into his psyche in future episodes or something. But yeah, I was a little disappointed with that.
I don't know. The filmmakers involved here seem to be interested in those kind of things. We'll see if, you know, the Marvel machine, you know, turns into the Marvel machine or not. But he's having this conversation with this actress named Gabrielle Bindloss. And he's having this conversation in this locker room of his old high school football locker room. And when I watched this episode for the first time, I thought that maybe this woman was a high school sweetheart that he had to leave behind when he went on his tour of duty or something like that. But the credits say that she plays Olivia Walker. So that is his wife. Do you think we're going to see more of her in the show?
Well, I guess I hope so, because hopefully, you know, her presence would serve to ground that character a little bit more, and maybe he would not be, you know, he seemed to have a good relationship with her in that, you know, very few minutes of screen time that we saw in that opening. So maybe if she comes back, she will serve to sort of help humanize him. I mean, even though that's a little bit of a reductive use of that character, I'm not sure how much room there's going to be for her to be able to like make a real impact in this series. But
it seems weird to introduce that character because it seems like you could relay all the information to the other character that's there, that Lamar Hoskins.
Mm-hmm.
This is his friend who he served with, aka Battlestar, and he tells to him that he's tired of the meetings, the speeches, the parades. He just wants to do his job, and Hoskins reminds him that this is his job. And Hoskins is played by Clee Bennett, I think is how you pronounce it. He's like one of those actors that you see in a billion TV shows playing cops or military people. He showed up in things like Flashpoint, Rookie Blue, Heroes Reborn, The Expanse, Jigsaw, Designated Survivor, Homeland. And he also played Sage on The Tick. So I think, Brad, did you see The Tick? I think Sage is one of the costume characters, right?
I did not see The Tick.
Oh, wow.
That's one of my pop culture blind spots.
I feel like that would be a show that you would like. I haven't seen it.
I thought the same, but I have never taken the dive.
Yeah. In the comics, Battlestar, who is Lamar Hoskins, was introduced in 1986, and he became the 5th character to assume the alias Bucky before taking on the name Battlestar. So what that means for the show, I don't know. What do you think of Hoskins in the show? Like, it seems like he's kind of a reflection of what Bucky is to Sam, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's. I was worried when we first saw this character that he was going to be like the equivalent of that archetype that you've seen so often that you know, from 80s movies and then movies that parody 80s movies, where like he's the number 2 guy to the big bully who's like, yeah, boss, tell him, you know, like that that thing, like just repeating everything that the guy says, the main villain says. But it seems like there's a little bit more to this character. Again, I'm not sure how much room this series is going to have in what we have 4 more episodes now to really like dig into this guy's psyche and like tell us a lot about his worldview and all of that, but he is a black character, and I'm curious, like if he is going to relate to Falcon in on those terms, in if there's going to be like a literal conversation that those two characters have about their race and their service to the country and what their standing is in the country and all of that kind of stuff. It seems like there could be an opportunity there to sort of bridge a gap between the Sam and Bucky side of things, and then the Battlestar new Captain America side of things there, because the show has proven to be willing to embrace and sort of lean into topics of race and social class and things like that. So that would be cool. But yeah, I'm not sure if he's going to get more screen time. Brad, what did you make of this character?
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I'm curious as to how their relationship will, come into play as far as the overall dynamic and like the thematic elements of race, and that goes for Walker's wife too, since she's a black woman, and so I'm interested to see if there will be something that comes to a head with Walker as a character where he essentially learns something about Sam's experience as far as what it would mean to have Sam as Captain America as opposed to bring in someone like Walker to replace Steve Rogers.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so Hoskins mentioned Star-Spangled Man, which is the title of this episode, but was also the song that Steve used to come out to like during like those USO tours, and it's also the song that's played by the brass band when John Wilson makes the appearance on the field here. The new Captain America is being interviewed in his old high school football field for Good Morning America because
Synergy,
yeah. Disney owns ABC and ABC does Good Morning America. But for some reason, he's being interviewed by Sarah Haynes, who is not one of the hosts of Good Morning America. She's a co-host of The View for over 600 episodes. Why? I don't know. But anyways, what do you think of the new suit here? I think I like it. I like that star with the A logo on his chest, and it's also on the helmet.
I like the parts of it. I don't like the stripes across the front of it because it looks like almost like a circus performer's jacket or something like that, like something you would see in the Greatest Showman if it were like turned into this big USA show. But I do like certain aspects of the design.
Something we didn't talk about last week, Peter, when we saw this new iteration of this costume, is that he has a holster and a gun, and we see him use the gun in this episode, and it's just such a I was going to say stark contrast, a stark contrast between Steve Rogers, who has this shield, and like the shield is the thing, it's the symbol, and that is such a powerful image, versus a shield and a gun, which this new Captain America just uses wantonly in this truck fight sequence. So I think there's a lot of power in the fact that this new character is armed in that way instead of just holding up this symbol of defense. He's got some offensive material there as well.
I thought this was interesting too, but then I did remember that in Captain America: The First Avenger, there's quite a grand heroic shot of Captain America and his team during the war busting into a Hydra base where he has the shield in hand and then he gets out a gun and they're all just shooting.
About that.
So it's but I do agree that I felt that same way. As I was kind of shocked. It's like, oh, so he's not fucking around.
So am I misremember? Did he lose that gun when he became when he got into the modern era, Brad? Do you remember? Because that wasn't part of his costume in the later movies, was it?
No, he didn't have a gun when he came back after being on the ice for all those years. And so it was never something that was addressed like, oh, you're not carrying a gun anymore. It was just something that he didn't do anymore.
Right. Okay.
I don't even think he used it that much in that first movie. I think it was just that like one shot or maybe another shot too. But it wasn't like he was wielding his gun a lot. But yeah, in the comics, he never had a gun. He chose the shield because he felt like the shield would better embody what a character like Captain America is trying to stand for. The interviewer gives John Walker's backstory, claims that he tested off the charts in every category, and we see him wielding the shield in a way that doesn't look human. It looks almost like he has superpowers. Then moments later, he says that he doesn't have any super strength. What do you guys think is up here?
I don't know. Which part did you think that he exhibited super strength in?
when he was throw the shield and it like went through a bunch of things and then like came back to him, like it didn't seem like something a normal person was capable of doing. It felt
So I think that's a fair perspective, but I think that that's just how the shield works, because they've talked about how the shield kind of defies physics, and I feel like it's the kind of thing with training you can figure out how to throw it and get it back to you. And he's definitely a strong person, but I mean, look at, Falcon doesn't have any superpowers either, but he's also would be able to do that as well.
yeah.
I
should
love
mention
that part. I like the footage, the training footage of him throwing the shield. It just
Yeah.
looks so cool.
Yeah.
So even though you kind of are meant to hate this guy, it's like, damn, he's really good with that shield.
I should mention that in the comics, both him and Battlestar did take the super serum. What do you guys think of Wyatt Russell as a whole in this episode? I don't know. I love his short haircut because we're usually seeing him with longer hair, right? And I think he's very good at playing that, like, on the line of like you don't know if you should like him or hate him. Like sometimes he's smug and sometimes he's very relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got an all-American vibe to him for sure that makes him feel like he could easily be a new Steve Rogers. But it's one of those things where after you spend some time with him, you kind of understand. It's like, okay, so I guess earlier when you were talking about him, it reminded me of Jerry Maguire, where I feel like this is a character who plays with his head and not his heart. It's all business, and there's not necessarily passion behind it once he reaches a certain point. Like if he's pushed, then like he has no problem fighting back. And I think that there's Steve Rogers had lines, and I feel like John Walker doesn't have those same lines.
Yeah, that's the thing. He doesn't seem like a morally irredeemable character like somebody like Tyler Hayward from WandaVision, where it's like, as soon as you sort of understand what that character's motivation and endgame is, it's clear that he is like a not a super villain, but a purely villainous presence. And there's enough of a sliver of humanity into that Wyatt Russell brings to this character that you feel like if all he needs is like a perspective shift, and he could be a good guy. He could be a character that actually sticks around, well beyond this show, if Marvel wants to use him in that way. If he, I feel like such an old man saying this, but like, change your attitude, like, just
shape up, like, or ship out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
in the comics, he does become a different character, right? Like he's not Captain America. He's oh my god,
Patriot
it's,
something.
It's U.S. Agent, isn't it?
What was that, Brad? Did we lose Brad?
No, I'm here, but you guys cut out for a second for me as well.
Let me put a time code. This is gonna be great. Okay, can you say the name again?
It's U.S. Agent, isn't it?
Yeah, you are correct.
That's right.
Okay, so Bucky and Sam share their first scene for the first time in the series called Falcon and Winter Soldier, and Bucky gives Sam a lot of shit for giving up the shield. He's very disappointed in him, and there's this whole fun exchange about androids, aliens, and wizards, the three villains they usually fight. And at the end of the scene, Bucky claims that he did read The Hobbit in 1937. As I came across this tweet from Alexis Ned on Twitter that pointed out the initial run in 1937 of The Hobbit came out at the end of the year. It was only 1,500 books. So are we to believe that Bucky was a 20-something-year-old man living in Brooklyn that bought one of those 1,500 books of the initial run?
I mean, maybe he was just in the right place at the right time.
So Sam and Bucky are going on this mission to Munich to chase the Flag Smashers, the group we saw in last week's episode. Bucky questions Sam about his plan, and Sam says, I have a plan, before jumping out of the plane. We saw a similar thing happen in the Avengers where Steve was asking Tony if he had a plan, and Iron Man says he did the same thing before, diving out of the plane. Bucky jumps out of the plane at less than 200 feet and survives the fall with no parachute. And they find some superhuman people smuggling some big crates believed to be some kind of vaccine. Bucky and Falcon have a great back and forth, or if you listen to Ben, a bad back and forth, arguing like two little brothers. I don't know. I like it. I like when you have this in the middle of action, which I guess is the same thing as what they did in Hobbs and Shaw, and it was so horrible in that movie. But they see a person in the back of one of the trucks that is taken off, who they think is a hostage, but it turns out to be Carly Morgenthau, who is played by the actress who played Enfys Nest in Solo, a Star Wars story. So, is this going to be her legacy, where she's playing like a small young woman who you don't expect to be the major leader of a big pirate gang?
I mean, she's certainly carving out that niche right now. I think her career is nascent enough where talking about
Yeah.
her legacy seems a little premature.
Yeah, I know. I'm just kidding. They have a big action scene fighting on top of the two semi trucks, and it's kind of fun, but I don't think it's as big or as cool as last week's. The new Captain America jumps out of a copter and joins the fight alongside his friend Battlestar. What did you guys think of this action scene?
Brad, it sounded like you liked it, right?
I did, yeah. I think it's really cool. I like the choreography in it. I love how they use the trucks maneuvering around to do some interesting things. With just how Falcon and Bucky navigate the fight, and how the super soldiers really just kind of kick their ass. And I think it really ramps up to once the new Captain America and Battlestar show up, and starts throwing around the shield and stuff. I absolutely loved the very quick shot when Cap throws the shield and it comes back, and Bucky is the one who catches it, and just without even flinching, Cap just grabs out of his hand, and just the quick glance he gives, are you fucking kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
I also like the moment where his friend Battlestar gets thrown off the truck, and John throws his shield to catch
Yes, yeah, that was
him. Yeah,
awesome.
that was a cool moment. I will say this about this big action scene is that it looked like, usually with big superhero stuff, the geography of what's going on is kind of a mess, and you're seeing close-ups and stuff. I feel like they animaticked this scene to death, because I felt like I knew where everything was and what everything was going on at the same time, and I wish that of any action scene. The Captain America throws his shield under Lamar, like I said. Carly punches John Rogers off the truck into a car, and John and Lamar pick up the reluctant Sam and Bucky. We learn that John and Battlestar found them because they traced Sam's drone, Red Wing, which is government property. Which I guess, I don't know. I'm guessing that's going to come into play later on as well. They mentioned this group, the GRC. This is the Global Reparation Council. They're a group in charge of reinstating citizens who were blipped away, restoring their health care, social security, and things like that. And they'll be mentioned later in this episode. But I love all the world building of what would happen with this blip, and I love how instrumental the whole blip seems like it's going to be to this series. John Lamar tried to convince Sam and Bucky to work with them, and Bucky and Falcon are not interested. John says he's not trying to replace Steve. He's just trying to be the best Captain America he can be. But he says that right before, trying to get Falcon to get Sam to be his wingman, which I think is, I mean, he's kind of saying like, oh, you'll never be Captain America, but you could be my wingman. Is the way I took it. It really feels at this point of the show that John Walker, like, I don't know, every scene I have new opinions on him, so it's interesting. Carly's legend is spreading across this world, and people look at her as a new Robin Hood. So the question is, how is she taking from the rich and giving to the poor? We haven't really, have we explored that? Have they told us?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we're supposed to sort of intimate that this robbery of these vaccines are supposed to be distributed to people who need it more than whoever they were intended for. But I think that's as far as we've really gotten, unless I missed something.
Yeah, Carly gets a text message from an unlisted number saying, "You took what was mine, and I'm going to find you and kill you." Who do you guys think this is? Is it the power broker that we find out later?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. Carly tells her team that we can't let the same assholes who were out back in power after the blip win. The GRC care more about those who came back than the ones who never left. So I think this is really interesting because if you think about this world where half the people in the entire world, disappear in an instant, and then the people that had to stay there for all that time, how many years were they there before they were
Oh,
put back?
I thought it was
Do you remember?
5,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they were making do, and probably some of them, like, had it better. They were elevated in their positions and stuff. And now with these people coming back, I get it. Like, people, maybe, I don't know, who should be more prioritized during that time? The people that had to deal with this loss for 5 years, or the people that lost 5 years of their life? Is there an answer to that question?
I don't think so. But I mean, certainly a tough situation. I'm glad that they're trying to grapple with it. I just wish that the exposition stuff was delivered a little bit more smoothly across this whole show. Really, like the first
Yeah.
half of this episode, like the John Walker interview, with Good Morning America, she like pauses in the middle of it and like, wait a second, I think you're being a little too humble, and then proceeds to read off every stat about him like to his own face. Like, there's a way to tell the audience that stuff without sort of breaking into the reality of the world and asking us to
See, that
accept
I
it
don't
that way.
mind.
And the same thing with the GRC when that's first brought up. It's like, one of the characters in the back of the van is like, oh, the GRC this. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. I appreciate that they're like throwing us into the deep end and like not giving us the full context for this. Maybe they'll bring it up in an interesting way later where it will answer this question. And then immediately, Sam, like the next sentence or something, Sam is like, oh yeah, the global reparations, committee or whatever. Like, okay, let's think about the reality here. Every character would know what that stood for, so there's no reason for him to actually say that aloud except to relay that information to the audience. And it's just a little awkward. And I know this stuff happens in every movie. I just think Marvel has been better than that in the past, and I wish that they would. I don't know. Maybe it's a different thing in TV. And TV writers are used to handling and sort of doling out exposition in certain ways, but I just it felt a little awkward to me.
I mean, I agree with you. I will disagree with the Good Morning America because I feel like that's what they do on Good Morning America. They're like, that's just how interviews go, I think. Or maybe that's my perception of Good Morning America. I don't know. But yeah, I agree. This whole GRC thing was a little clunky, and I had to rewind and be like, wait, what? This felt just so weird. So Carly asks her group for a commitment from because tomorrow, quote, there's no going back. So what do you guys think they have planned? Seems like something big. No theories?
Man, yeah, it's tough to say. I don't know. Like, Brad, based on what we've seen of this organization thus far, there's like uh, is there a connection to their appearance in the first episode and this? Like, is this part of the same heist? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I'm not
Is that
entirely
clear
sure.
to you?
No, I'm not entirely sure. And I think that them being vague about it is probably intentional. Like, and we'll probably learn what their big move is, and that maybe it might have some kind of impact on the Marvel Cinematic Universe at large, outside of just this series. But what I also do wonder is how it will either go along with or contrast what Zemo will likely be up to, because we know that he's not just going to be stuck in that cell. There's footage of him in trailers and whatnot, being out and wearing the purple mask that he wore in the comics. So I'm curious if I wonder if this is something that Zemo will align himself with. If their plan is to break Zemo out because maybe they know his perspective aligns with theirs. I'm not sure.
One thing I was wondering is, like, if this is a vaccine, like, so they have all these crates of something that we think is a vaccine. Some people think it's super serum. I'm not sure how that would play into things. We know that we've been told that the show does have a pandemic subplot of some kind because that was reported in the news. So I'm wondering if it could be possible that they're going to set off a bioweapon and have the vaccine to give them the power and give the power to the people that are with them. Maybe, is that like reaching?
Oh, interesting. because then they could just issue it out to half the population and that could be a way to sort of return things to a blip world. Is
Yeah.
that what you mean?
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting, but I don't know. That might be like too big of a thing for this group seems super small
That's a
to
lot of
accomplish
depth
something
for
like
a Marvel property to
that. Yeah.
roll out, because that seems like something that would be more permanent than a snap, where characters could come back. But that would
Yeah.
be interesting and sort of in line with their their sort of worldview.
Well, I'm not going to say that they get away with it, Ben. Like they could,
Right.
get stopped. But okay, Bucky tells Sam that there's someone he needs to meet, and they go to Baltimore. Before they go to this house that they're going to, they meet this little kid who calls Falcon the Black Falcon. What do you guys think of that whole interaction?
I think it's just a way to sort of humanize the characters a little bit and give us like a small sort of moment of levity and give us a little bit of an insight into how Sam thinks about himself. So yeah, it was just a nice little moment.
I also think that there's a little bit of maybe commentary there too about how there are certain superheroes that have been given a moniker that dictates their race.
Natalie Portman is the female Thor.
Yeah,
or, that kind of.
yeah. So like calling him Black Falcon almost seems like in some ways reductive, but at the same time, on the other side of the spectrum, part of me wondered if maybe it was a way of his dad, being proud and calling him Black Falcon because he is a black man and wants that to be something that's prominent. So I think
that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah, there's a couple different ways to read it, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So they find the slightly rundown house and they meet Isaiah Bradley. He's played by Carl Lumley. This is a 70-year-old actor who is a veteran of television and screen. He's had 177 roles over the last 40 years. And notably, he played Marcus Dixon on Alias. He was a detective in Cagney and Lacey. He recently was in Dr. Sleep, and he voices Manhunter in a lot of the Justice League animated movies. It's also worth noting that we meet his grandson, Eli Bradley, who in the comics plays Patriot, one of the Young Avengers. In WandaVision, we met Wanda and Vision's children, who are some of the Young Avengers. It seems like they're building up to the Young Avengers. Do you think they're setting up Eli Bradley to be part of that group?
This seemed more just like a little comics nod to me than anything, but I guess there's plenty of opportunity for him to become a bigger presence later on if they choose to go that route.
Yeah, fair enough. Isaiah has a history with Bucky in the 50s. Bucky says that he's not a killer anymore, and Isaiah says you can't wake up one day and decide that what you're going to be. It doesn't work like that, or maybe that does for you. What did you think of this whole interaction between them?
What do you think, Brad?
I think it fits in perfectly with what started, in the first episode, where there's these underlying, racial tones and thematic elements that will be playing through, and Sam's place as a black superhero. And in this case, I think this commentary comes from the fact that Bucky is fortunate enough that he's able to shake this image as an assassin in some ways, simply because he's, a white guy, and Isaiah Bradley hasn't been so lucky. This is a character from Marvel Comics who was part of a large experiment where 300 African American soldiers were served as test subjects for the super soldier serum to create more people, and most of them died. And I don't know how much they're going to dig into this movie, whether that secret project that tried to create more super soldiers will become prominent. But I think that the fact that this is a black man who is imprisoned and experimented on and everything and treated pretty unfairly by the government definitely has some relevancy to the stuff that Sam is going through right now.
Yeah, and then they're told to leave. Sam argues with Bucky in the middle of the street, and this draws the attention of a couple white police officers who begin interrogating Sam before they realize that he's Falcon and apologize. I think this is a great scene. By the way, the first few episodes of this show, or at least the first half of this show, I think was filmed in 2019, before the pandemic, before the Black Lives Matters, the big protests and stuff like that. And it's so interesting that this show, if this show was able to have that scene in there before that time, how I don't know. It seems like they had their hand on the pulse. What do you guys think?
I mean, unfortunately, that pulse has been pulsing
Yeah.
for many
Oh yeah.
decades.
I'm not saying it's nothing insightful, but like it's interesting that a big Marvel thing has that, and it was filmed before. Yeah, I guess you're right. Like it's stupid to say that that's commendable.
Well, it's just I think you bring up a good point in that it's
Yeah.
those issues have certainly become like more in the forefront
Yeah.
in the wake of last year, and that's something that people might view through a different lens now. But I think for like for Malcolm Spellman and like any Black creator in Hollywood, this is
That's been
day-to-day
life.
life kind of thing.
Yeah. Very true. In the end, they end up arresting Bucky because he didn't show up for his court-mandated therapy session. And it's interesting here that even when they arrest Bucky, they kind of apologize for having to take him into custody, compared to how they treated Sam at the beginning of this interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, the difference there. John Rogers gets Bucky released.
John Walker?
Or, sorry. Yeah, where did I get Rogers? John
Steve
Walker.
Rogers.
Yeah. John gets Bucky released and says that Bucky is too valuable of an asset to have to adhere to these regular therapy sessions. So what do you think is going on here? Because at this point, it seems like they're already in this adversarial position, but it seems like John is helping out Bucky because Bucky doesn't want to go to these therapy sessions. What is his end game? Is he trying to get them to join him still at this point?
Yeah, for sure. He thinks that there's still a chance that they can work together, that they can team up, and so he's doing him a favor, maybe as an act of good faith of helping him out and hoping that he'll follow suit and do it. But I think this also leans into more about giving us an idea of John Walker as a character, because Steve Rogers wasn't the kind of guy to throw his name around, throw his authority around, and dictate who should do what. He until somebody like essentially put him in the position of being a leader when he was forced to. Whereas we see, Walker doesn't hesitate to, put in a good word and make things happen. He's posing for selfies with people. And so he's acting much more like a celebrity and using his, name to do things rather, unlike Steve Rogers was.
Yeah, and there's so full of himself too, like in that scene in the police station.
Yeah, and there's that line where he's like, do whatever you have to do. We've got some unfinished business, him and I, and same for you, Sam, basically. So that seems a little bit more ominous than just like, we have a mission to complete. To me, it seems, that's not really something that you say unless there's some sort of like ominous intent behind it, So I wonder like what exactly he wants from them at this juncture.
Yeah. Well, they meet with Dr. Rayner. She demands a session with both of them. It's almost like a couples therapy session. It's a lot of bickering. There's a staring contest. Bucky confronts Sam about giving up the shield Steve gave him. And there's that really sad line that like you can see, what this means to Bucky, where it says, maybe he was wrong about you. And if he was wrong about you, he was wrong about me. What do you guys think about this scene?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Brad.
No, I was just gonna say I dug it. It's definitely a little on the nose, but that's not to be unexpected in these kinds of situations. Sometimes you just have to lay it out there. But I thought Sebastian Stan delivered it really well. There was power behind it, and you can tell that it's something that as a character, Bucky is concerned about whether or not he can actually be redeemed, because he doesn't view himself as being fully redeemed. In the previous episode, he talked about how he got a little bit of time to himself in Wakanda to kind of rejuvenate and recharge and kind of get a grasp on things, but he still hasn't had much time to deal with his past and his trauma. And so I think he's hoping that what Steve saw in him is true and that he can be redeemed. And so he doesn't want, his trust to be misplaced.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I've already mentioned that I didn't really care for like the jokey part of this, but I think that line that you read, Peter, if he was wrong about you, then he was wrong about me line, like you said, Brad, is delivered with some serious power behind it, and I'm glad that it's that is the underlying thing, the position from which Bucky is coming, because for this whole episode, really, he's sort of needling Sam about like, why'd you give up the shield, whatever. And for me, I was wondering if he was going to come around to the idea to actually say out loud, like, Steve, like, you didn't deserve it. Basically, if you turned it in, maybe Steve should have given it to me, like that kind of mentality. But instead,
Oh,
it came to, if he was wrong about you, then he was wrong about me, and that gives us a window into exactly the mindset that Brad just laid out. So I was really happy to hear that was the motivation there instead of the other thing.
yeah, exactly what you said. Sam says it was his choice to make, and Sam suggests that they squash their problems, work with each other to stop this threat, and plan to go their separate ways after. Uh, John and his friend are waiting outside the station for them, and they again try to convince them to combine their resources. It is relayed that the group is taking the medicine they just stole to one of these displaced communities in Europe. They don't know where she is now. I don't know, like a lot of this, like exposition, like it doesn't even see. Like I don't understand where they're going with it. Like why they're going to one of these communities in Europe. Like I don't understand where exactly it's headed or why
I
it
think that's part of the
matters.
Robin Hood thing, right? Like
Yeah,
the idea that these people are displaced, I think has to do with the blip and people
yeah,
coming back, and then, like, if you have set up, in a space for 5 years, and then all of a sudden you have double the people that need to fill that space. Of course, there are going to be refugee camps and things like that where people are fighting over resources and space and all that kind of stuff. So it makes sense. I mean, I think they say there are like hundreds of these
yeah.
camps set up across Central and Eastern Europe.
But I think to your point though, when you were talking about all this, is like they're telling us a lot of this stuff, and we're not being shown it. And like
Right.
I feel like the language of cinema or TV is for us to learn by seeing it,
Yeah,
and just being told it just seems so weird. I
I
don't know.
agree.
Okay, so Sam says because they don't work for the government, they're free agents, and this allows them to be more flexible, and thus they will not be working with them because why would they want to adhere to, like, all the rules that the new Captain America has to abide by. And John says a word of advice to them: stay out of my way. So that again seems a little ominous there. The power brokers show up, and the flag smashers need to take off in their plane fast. One of the super soldiers sacrifices himself to prevent them from catching them. Who do you think the power? Like, what are the power brokers? Like, so far, like they've just basically been mentioned, right? Like, or did we see them in the first episode? I don't think we did.
I don't think so.
So, what do you guys think? Like, who are the power brokers, and what do they want?
That's a
I
good
guess
question.
they're the ones that are in power that don't want the power to be. I don't know. It seems like such a like very vague concept
It
right
kind
now.
of seems like a government organization. Like, there's a military force, there's a bunch of like like MCU vehicles, like black SUVs, and a bunch of soldiers get out right outside of the airport there. And then there's like a guy who looks like he works for the FBI or something, who like makes this call and says whatever he says, like they got away, whatever. And he's wearing a bulletproof vest and like it doesn't seem like a super villain organization. It seems more like a government entity. So I wonder what exactly they're getting at there.
Now, I don't know about them in the comics, but I did some Wikipediaing, and in the comic books, there's a character named the Power Broker. He's a mad scientist who is kind of a satire on public obsession and with health and fitness. And you know how I mentioned earlier that in the comics, John Walker and Battlestar uh, got the super serum? Well, they got it from the character of the Power Broker. So
Interesting.
I don't know if that's related here. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know how you even connect the dots, because it doesn't feel like they connect aside from the comics, right? But okay. Bucky thinks Isaiah was saying that people when he said my people, he meant Hydra. Bucky's plan is to meet with Baron Zemo, who knows all of Hydra's secrets. And just then we leave with our tease for the end of this episode. Like they teased the new Captain America last episode. They go into this prison cell in Berlin. There's this classical music playing. There's this chess game in progress. And then we see just for a few seconds the side of Zemo cut to black. What did you guys think of the end of this episode?
I'm curious about where it's going. I just didn't really love this episode as a whole, and I think the tease of him is a lot less of a cliffhanger to me than the last episode was, because I think we have a sense of Zemo as a character much more than we had a sense of what John Walker was going to be like, and obviously we learned a lot about that in this episode. But I think there was so much of an open question at the end of last week's episode of like, how exactly involved is John Walker going to be in these events? Is he basically just going to be a puppet like Steve Rogers was, back in the 1940s? Is he going to be an active antagonist? What's going on? And we have such a history with Zemo already that for them to end the episode saying, all right, we're going to go see Zemo, dun, dun, dun. And then you see Zemo in a cell and then it just ends the episode. It's like, okay, all right, let's just get to it already. Like, what is the big deal here? But yeah, that was just me.
Brad, what did you think of the Zemo reveal? I mean, we knew it was coming, so it's not really like a surprise.
Yeah, it wasn't shocking. If anything, it just piques my interest to see what they're going to do with him as a character and how he ties into the rest of the story. But yeah, I mean, and I like Daniel Bruhl, and I'm glad to see him coming back and getting to do a little bit more.
Let's get into the speculation side of things. In the comics, I learned that Battlestar would stage attacks for Walker to come in and save the day to look like a hero. I'm not sure they're doing that in this show, but do you think there's any way that John Walker is working with the Flag Smashers?
It's an interesting idea. That it would definitely create a conspiracy thriller kind of angle to this, where the government knows that they need a way to get people to believe in the new Captain America now that Steve Rogers is gone, and creating a threat like this would be something nefarious enough for a secret government organization to do in order to instill that faith in people. I think, yeah, I don't know. It would kind of be along the lines of something similar to the 9/11 conspiracies that are out there and things like that. That the government did these things to strike fear in us and help us to rely on the government more for our safety. So I mean, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. Also, in the comics, at one point, Walker was hired to make Falcon fail publicly to kind of discredit him. So I'm wondering if there's going to be part of that in the show at some point. But I guess that's it. Like, I don't know. Usually, for when we were doing the WandaVision episodes, there was so many questions to ask at the end of the episode. But I don't feel like there is that many questions here. Where do you guys think we're headed? Like, what do you think we're going to see in the next episode, other than obviously them coming face to face with Zemo?
I'm intrigued by that suggestion you brought up about like the idea of introducing, some sort of bioweapon and then like strategically deploying these vaccines to, half the people so they can sort of literally return the world to a state, where it was during the events of the blip. I have no idea if they're going to go that way, but I kind of like that idea now that you mention it. So that's as close as I can get to good speculation at this point.
Brad, what do you think? How do you think Zemo is going to get out?
That's also a good question. I mean, the thing that I just mentioned is really my best theory, is that maybe the Flag Smashers break him out. But we know that Zemo is quite the manipulative character. He knows how to get what he wants, and he is one of those people who seems to be, playing chess when it comes to his moves. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think, and the one thing that's interesting too, and this is something that we talked about, when we were watching WandaVision, is that we're getting close to the point where there's not a ton of footage in the trailers that hasn't been seen. The only things that I can think of are like, there's a couple shots where Bucky and Falcon are like in a nightclub of some sort, and maybe just a couple of quick action beats that you don't really know what's going on. But otherwise, we're heading into uncharted territory as far as the footage we've seen.
And Zemo out of jail, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
As well.
Well, we saw the new Captain America get somebody out of jail in this episode. So if he has that ability, and he could be a diplomat that maybe could get Zemo out of jail. So maybe Falcon and Winter Soldier will have to sort of go back to John Walker, like hat in hand, and say, "Hey, can you help us? Get this guy out," or something. That could be a way to sort of keep him tied into the action if they don't want to just do the splintering off of, those characters being on parallel tracks and then potentially, clashing at the very end of the series or something like that.
Do we think that Zemo is gonna be a positive character in this? Like, I don't know. I just assumed that he was going to continue being an antagonist, but they're gonna work with him in some way. But I guess I don't know. Like, what
Maybe
do you
it'll be
guys?
like a Hannibal Lecter kind of
Yeah.
situation where like he's in jail for most of the series, and then maybe they get him out at the very end or something like that. I don't know. Brad, have we seen like much footage of Zemo outside of, well, there's that, I remember there's that shot of him like standing at a statue, like sort of mourning the loss of Sokovia and like his family and stuff like that. But
Yeah, the only
has there been more of him?
There's one shot of him with the purple like ski mask thing on, and then another shot where he's walking and he has it in his hand, and it's like a slow motion shot. But otherwise, I can't recall any shots where like there's him involved in action or doing anything like significant that would make sense, in the context of the show.
You can find more of all the work at slashfilm.com. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. We like hearing your theories, your speculation. Is there anything that we missed? Point it out to us, and maybe we'll read it in an upcoming episode. Please head on over to our Apple Podcast page and write us a review. You could write just like one sentence or two. Helps us out quite a bit. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you on Monday.